Welcome to Charity Therapy, a podcast from Birkin Law about building better nonprofits. I'm your host, Jess Birkin. Hey, Megan.
Hey, Jess. How's it going?
It's going good. I'm really excited because we have Jason Viana here with us. Hi, Jason.
Hi, Megan and Jess. How's it going?
It's going good. So, Jason, you and I went to grad school together, and tell our listeners who you are.
That's a very existential question, Jess, but from a professional sense, I'm the executive director of an organization in Dakota County called The Open Door, where we provide fresh and healthy food to people. So I lead an organization. Jess decided to go help people figure out how to lead all the organizations. So I'm a little more focused in my work.
There you go. I like that, the dig in there. That's awesome.
There's no dig.
Grad school friends are the best. All right. So, Megan, you scoured the internet for some nonprofit questions for us to deal with today.
Yes, we have a good list of them today. So we've got some good Q&A from the depths of the internet. Should we just get started?
Yeah, go for it.
So the first question we have is about nonprofit liability. So the person says, I recently started a new nonprofit to help distribute food to people experiencing hunger in my town. I don't have my 501c3 status yet, but I'm ready to start distributions. I am worried about one thing, though. Can the organization get sued if someone gets sick from the food that I provide? How can you prevent that?
Well, Jason, this seems like an ideal question for you to take a stab at.
It does. And I've got, I'm going to kick it back to you at some point because in general, first of all, good job starting a nonprofit to give out food. I'm a big fan of that. That's what I do. I'm certainly hoping that this person checked to make sure there were other places and they're working with them, but separate question. Are you safe handing out food? The answer is yes, because there was a federal act. I think it was the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act, if I'm correct. And it basically says if you donate food to a nonprofit organization, it's done in good faith and it protects you from any liability. Now, last time I read it, I think it says to a nonprofit organization. So I'm not sure the fact that you're not incorporated, but I would imagine you should be pretty safe. What do you think about that, Jess?
Yeah, so this question is a little bit funky because they say they started a new nonprofit, but I don't have my C3 status yet. So I wouldn't say that they aren't incorporated. Hopefully they are incorporated, and they just don't have tax exemption at this point. So there's really no reason that they couldn't start distributions just because they don't have a tax exempt status yet. I mean, if they're not incorporated, they would be an all volunteer association and have more exposure to personal liability. But like here in Minnesota, once you start a nonprofit corporation, regardless of whether you have your tax exemption or not yet, there is limited liability for the volunteers working at the organization. So to some extent, state law protects every nonprofit from liability for sort of doing their good deeds, and that extends to directors and officers who would probably be the people getting sued if someone got sick from the food that they provided. Now, that said, I don't think you should just be like, whatevs, like, I'm just going to give out the foods. And like, if you get sick, that's on you.
Yeah. Well, and just to jump in there, Jess, I mean, that's for sure. I mean, handing out food comes in lots of forms and there are food safety rules for a reason. And so I believe my understanding is you're protected, but there is, I hate to use legal terms, but gross negligence. I mean, if you've got milk sitting outside all day and give it to somebody and they get sick, you can be held liable for that. So there's a food safety common sense element, but the spirit of the law, as I understood it, was to ease concerns mainly for people donating the food that they wouldn't get in trouble. But I think as long as you're taking reasonable steps, again, that's why I'm hoping they're taking other steps besides just good intentions.
Well, then what, running a nonprofit that feeds people, I wonder if do you have like state health department compliance that you need to do, Jason?
That's a really interesting question, Jess. And we are not regulated by the health department. We are regulated by the Department of Agriculture.
Oh, interesting. I did not know that.
Well, if you ever notice every year when they have the arguments about the farm bill and suddenly somehow...
I know that food stamps go through the farm bill. So that makes sense, actually.
Yeah, so it all get weaved together. So we're overseen by the Department of Agriculture, and we have a set of standards and rules that we must adhere to. But I don't know that the Department of Agriculture inspects or checks in as frequently as the health department, but we do have rules and regulations we are to require to follow.
Okay. So that's interesting. I think that this person probably needs to just be a good distributor of foods, don't you? I think this is one of those things you're like worrying about the wrong thing.
Yes, you're exactly worrying about the wrong thing. Take 5 minutes, Google your local health department. They have a safety, probably an online food safety course that you can take. Take it, understand the rules. You'll be just fine.
Right on.
Great. All right. So moving on to question number 2. Here we go. There is a local nonprofit that has been lying dormant for the past 10 years. All the board members have died and no one has stepped up to get it operating again. I went to the Secretary of State's office and filled out some paperwork to become its registered agent. I checked the bylaws and there's nothing written that prevents me from becoming the registered agent. On this basis, am I legally the nonprofit's registered agent since no one owns the nonprofit anymore?
Okay. There are so many things.
So many questions.
Okay. So first of all, I like how this person writes about it as if it's just like this random nonprofit. There is a local nonprofit that's been lying dormant for the past 10 years. What? Okay. So first of all, the nonprofit probably has been involuntarily dissolved by the state's secretary of state or the state registrar or the entity for corporations in their state. All the board members have died. I have like so many questions. Like they're like the sitcom creator, TV writer in my mind is like, how did that happen? What sort of like...
It's like they went into a murder scene and the only thing they got concerned about was who left this pencil here? It's like, there's so many other questions that you have about what happened to this organization.
All the board members have died. Was it a murder-suicide? Or like, how bad did that last board meeting get? No, I'm just teasing. I'm sure like people were just elderly, but like if your board members start dropping off and, passing away, how are they not replacing anyone? It's just a bizarre situation.
And if you stumbled upon this, the thing that you really keyed in on was, you know what? I want to be the registered agent. Like that's really where I want to put my time and effort. I'm going to go all the way to the Secretary of State to be the registered agent. And I'm good.
Okay. And then where they say, I've checked the bylaws and there's nothing written that prevents me from becoming the registered agent. Well, how does this person have the bylaws? Like what? There's so much more to the story here. I'm like, who are you? How do you know about this nonprofit to the extent that you actually have a copy of their bylaws? And bylaws are usually, that's not a public document. It's an internal document. So where did you get them? Like,
I recently joined the PTO at my kid's school and they don't even have a copy of the bylaws.
Right.
So I feel like this could be the beginning of the first ever Netflix series on a nonprofit organization, just to figure out all of the details around what happened over the last 10 years.
Yeah. So, and just, I don't know what it's like in every state, but in most states, it takes about 3 clicks of your mouse to reincorporate, restore the corporate status of a nonprofit that's been involuntarily dissolved. So basically my read on this is this person went to the website, clicked renew, reanimated the zombie nonprofit, and put themselves down as the registered agent. Okay, so on this basis, they say they are legally the nonprofit's registered agent since no one owns the nonprofit. Well, yeah, you're the registered agent, but so what? Well, like the registered agent's purpose is to receive legal notices.
Well, that was
so
my
like if you get
question.
sued, the legal notice can go to the registered agent for the corporation. Like literally anybody could just be the registered agent. Sometimes attorneys do it. There are services that do it. This doesn't give them any special status. They don't get to vote on the board. Like, I don't understand the end game here. Like, they're going to get official mail for the nonprofit.
Well, that was kind of my question, Jess, is if you successfully become the registered agent, what did you win? I mean, because you're right, you can't be on the board. You just get mail.
Right. You're going to get the mail. You're going to get the junk mail that comes from the bulk mailing lists that the Secretary of State sells. I don't know what their end game is here. They're not saying like, I want to be on the board. I want to revitalize this nonprofit. But congratulations, you are now the registered agent. It's such a, like, I want to find this person and interview them and like find out what's going on here.
You know what, Jess? As a listener of this podcast, I would donate funds to support you traveling if you found him, just so I could hear the interview.
We need to hire a PI and get more information.
Right.
Oh, I feel like the follow-up next 2 paragraphs of this question would be revealing some sort of weird plot line where they are going to use this nonprofit as a tax loophole for their personal gain. It feels shady.
No, this
That's
is
exactly
just
what I thought.
This is the guy in your neighborhood that knows when the mail person is late and keeps them on a clock. And this has become his quest. It's got nothing to do with public service. This is about order and making sure that things get done on time. This is, anyway.
There's nothing in the bylaws that prevents me from becoming the registered agent. Well, good for you, buddy. Enjoy your junk mail.
Because we don't know how many times he was passed over. He probably tried to be the registered agent, and this is his chance.
Oh, yeah. There could have been some whole backstory where this was their MO, that they wanted this status. But first they had to murder all the board members.
Then wait 10 years or whatever.
Yeah, to let the hubbub die down.
Make sure there's no suspicion.
All right.
Yeah, you should probably go to the next question because I could go
Moving
really
on.
weird places on this.
Yes, moving on from that weird place. All right. So this is a very topical question. So person writes in and says, I'm currently starting a nonprofit that is filing for its 501c3 status. I initially thought that fundraising would be impossible right now between quarantine and the public focus on more important causes than mine, like Black Lives Matter. However, apparently fundraising is peaking for some people. So what can I do to raise money for my new organization in this environment?
Oh, boy.
Huh. That's a good question, and I think you could probably take the whole COVID piece out and ask the question anytime.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's just so much in that question. I mean, ultimately, in my mind, fundraising, I mean, it's always hard, and certainly there are variables right now that make it challenging. I mean, I just depends on what the mission is. But I mean, if this person was standing in front of me and they asked that question, how do I raise money for my organization? I mean, it's the same way that every organization does. You have to find a way to take your mission and see if it matters to people that want to support it. How can you make a clear statement? If you support this mission, we will make this change, and enough people believe in it, they'll support you. I mean, it's a really simple answer, but what are your initial thoughts, Jess?
There's part of me that is super cynically like excited that this person has had the reality check that fundraising might be impossible. Because a lot of new founders they just think money's going to fall from the sky. Well, I'm getting my 501c3 status and then the money will show up. So the fact that this person is like, hey, this might actually be hard. I'm like, all right, you're making progress, because it takes a while for people to realize that people don't just hand you buckets of money because you have tax exemption. So I'm like, hey, here's a silver lining to coronavirus, I think it's interesting that their take, though, is like that they could get in on this, fundraising boom for some organizations. Like, yes, fundraising is peaking for some people. If you have a particularly relevant mission right now, or you have really great strategy, there are certain missions that people are very excited about giving to. I'm guessing you have experienced this yourself, Jason.
Oh, this period of time has been remarkable for any organization in the hunger relief space. I worked, and Jess, you know this, I worked for the Red Cross for a long time.
Yep.
And what we're in is a disaster fundraising cycle. And at the Red Cross, we saw it every time there was a significant major disaster anywhere in the United States. I mean, people care, and people are moved when they see people in pain and in distress, and they want to help. And the way many people can help, because everyone can't run down and volunteer, and everyone can't help rebuild the city, so they send money. And so there's always a natural surge around disasters. And this, the murder of George Floyd and COVID-19 are very different disasters. They're not natural disasters in the way, but the coronavirus has shined a light on hunger relief in a way that is great, because there has been a surge. But the question will be, when does that dry up? Because it always dries up after a big outpouring.
Right. And, this person doesn't say what their mission is. So just to kind of ask for advice, like, what can I do to raise money for my new organization in this environment? Well, it depends. I kind of go back to, what are you doing? And are you replicating, like, how competitive is your space? The person from the first question who was, had a feeding the hungry mission, they might have great success right now, but also it might be really hard because they have no brand recognition. They're not a trusted resource. They don't have any street cred. So if there are bigger and stronger nonprofits that are already doing the work that you would like to be doing, it might still be really hard,
Yeah, and I try to focus on the question, especially because this is the podcast, we're answering the questions. But anytime I hear someone, hey, I just started my own nonprofit or my own 501c3, I always have so many questions about those very things. Because, if your organization identifies a gap, like a clear gap in your community that needs to be addressed, and with the solution you bring forward, you could make a tangible impact, you're going to have success. I mean, if you get the right people around you, it's not hard to do. But so often it's a well-intended question, back to the first one about folks like, oh, I want to hand out food, but I don't really know any of the rules around it. It just makes me wonder, did they do their homework? Did they make sure there wasn't someone else doing it? Or if there was, could you learn from them? Maybe someone else is doing their mission in another city or in another state. Go chat with them and figure out how to replicate their efforts. But it just always seems like that question makes me think there's lots of other things they probably didn't think of before they went through the process of setting up their organization.
Oh, for sure. And I see that all the time, that, people are excited about doing the good thing and they just start running down the road, and they haven't really taken the time to do sort of the due diligence and the homework, and like, how will this actually work on a daily basis? Who else is doing this? What other strategic partners do I need to align with? How do I not compete for the same dollars with similar organizations? That's boring homework. That's not the excited, I want to start this new thing and I have all this like activation energy around it. So you're absolutely right.
Well, and it's the questions are in the wrong order. It shouldn't be, hey, I just set up my organization. Now, how do I fundraise? Like, you should figure out.
Yes.
I mean, that's backwards. And I know I don't get this anywhere near as you do. And well, maybe I do because I don't charge by the hour because I can't help them. But people
I don't either anymore. It's all subscriptions, Jason.
Oh, being a mission partner. But people, they know I went to school for nonprofit management and they know that I work in the field. And they're like, hey, I want to start a nonprofit.
Yep.
And I mean, I don't know how they keep coming because I feel like I crush people's dreams all the time with some basic questions. And one of them is, how are you, have you thought about how you're going to raise support? And they just look at you like, I didn't think that was part of it, or I thought that was not hard. Anyway,
But you just get your C3 status, Jason, and then money rains out of the sky like manna from heaven.
Step 1, steal underpants. Step 2, I can't remember. Step 3, profit. Step 2 is really important.
Right. I remember there was one time back when I first hung my shingle and I was taking phone calls from people, and this guy wanted to talk about starting a nonprofit. And I was like, okay, so what is your, how are you going to fund your work? And he's like, well, I'm going to get a third from the public. And I was like, oh, okay. So he's been reading the IRS documentation. And I was like, right. So you could pass the public support test for the IRS. And where will that come from? And he was like, well, when I get my 501c3 status, I get a third from the government. And I was like, what? Oh, wait a minute. Like, I don't know. He just thought someone was going to slide an envelope of cash across the table once they got their determination letter. Fundraising is not like that. It's really hard. And you actually have to convince people to open their wallets.
Yeah, you put all the work into opening the bank account, and then you wonder why there's no money in it.
Why isn't this bank account filling up with money? I don't understand.
So, in closing on that question, if that person's listening, and I'm sure they are, the key is you're not going to find some opportunistic way to make your mission stand out if it's not relevant. Fundraising is all about relevancy, and it's all about impact, and it's about having a plan. So slow down, get your stuff together, and good luck.
All right, so I have one last question here, and this one's a little bit meatier. So here's the situation. I am a founder and executive director of a nonprofit that has grown tremendously in the past few years. When we first started 5 years ago, I never expected it to get so big so quickly, and we weren't prepared. Currently, we're short-staffed, and I'm doing several jobs at once. With all the moving parts and staff to manage, I'm now teetering on the edge of a massive burnout. The stress of everything is beginning to cause my mental health to deteriorate, and I've started having panic attacks. I don't want to leave because I love this organization and its mission, but I'm not sure what else I can do to preserve my health.
Yeah, that's a heavy one. You want to go first, Jess?
No, I'm going to let the executive director go first.
Yeah, well, I'm processing my thoughts on that because there's a lot in that. And I mean, I have a big job and my organization has grown tremendously in the 4 years since I've been here. But ultimately, I believe self-care is so much your responsibility. And it's regardless of the stress level and the busyness, self-care is something you have to make a priority. The work will never all get done. I could work all day, every day for the rest of the year, and there would still be more work to do. And so part of it is, that's on you to figure out. Now there's a lot of questions around the growth of your organization. And, my really big questions are, where is your board in this? Because if you're having that much growth, you need your board and your staff to help you figure out where those growing pains are and how to address them. If you're growing, that's a good sign as long as you're meeting the need of your mission. If you're carrying out your mission, if you're growing, hopefully that means support. So, maybe it's an HR consultation. There are solutions to spreading out the work of your organization, whether it's through volunteers, whether it's through staffing. But I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen this as well, Jess, there is I don't know if it's a culture or kind of a badge of honor sometimes in our sector about burning yourself out. And I don't think it has to be that way. And again, I don't know their situation, but every time I hear that, I always want to start with the person and figure out what they could do to take care of themselves. And then I look at the board for the structure.
Yeah, no, I think you're dead on there. The first couple of things that come up for me are this person needs to work on better boundaries. They probably could benefit from seeing a therapist. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, like, hey, I've been going to therapy for 5 years. You have to learn to figure out how to manage these things for yourself, because you are in control of you. And the world will always be crazy, and there will always be a bottomless pit of work to do. And, we we talk about this here at the law firm all the time, right? It's like the to-do list is never ending. The client's needs are bottomless. And sometimes you just have to turn it off. You have to enforce not checking your email at nights and weekends, things like that. And you're absolutely right. That starts with the person. The second place I go is, why are you not staffing appropriately to match your growth? What's the problem there? And, I never expected to get so big so quickly. So one of the things that I know can happen is we take big grant money, and to grow super quickly, either you have the ridiculous disaster funding that all of a sudden pours in a very short period because people are jazzed about your mission all of a sudden. That's one kind of growing quickly. But another way you can grow really quickly is by successfully taking foundation or government grant money. And what I have seen several times, especially when I was in-house, is that program staff will write grants that do not actually cover the organizational cost of expanding in that way. So you take all this grant money in that doesn't cover the cost to staff up appropriately to deliver on things or to manage the back office or whatever it is. And now you actually don't have the unrestricted dollars to fund the staff that you need. So that could be a problem too. So, but again, that's on you. Program staff don't like to hear that they need to raise money to support the organization. So you either need to build in an indirect rate or raise that money separately in order to expand the programming, because you cannot run the nonprofit without the staff to do the work. And that includes back office staff as well as frontline staff.
And this sounds like a very different scenario than we've lost a funder and we've lost staff, and I'm desperately trying to keep this thing afloat. And that also is a place where you need to have discussions about boundaries and help. But if you're growing that fast, the other part is, and I'm thinking just about our current, in the middle of this COVID response, sometimes you just have to say no. And that's a hard thing to do. One of the things when I started with our organization, we had a saying that my staff now give to me. Every time you say yes to say something, you're saying no to something else.
Yes.
And every time you say yes to a funder, we've had funders during this coronavirus response come to us and say, we want to give you X amount of money to spend in the next 4 months. And I've had to go back to them and say, thank you so much for thinking of us. I've received so much money that I can't spend it all in the next 4 months. Now, if you're willing to sit down and have a conversation about how we view this response as a 12 to 24 month response, because we know that's going to be the economic impact, I would love to talk about how you can make an impact with our organization. But if not, I'm going to encourage you to go somewhere else. And so if you're growing because people are throwing money at you, sometimes you have to say no to the money if it doesn't come in the right way with the right timelines, or if it isn't supporting the right part of your staff.
Yep. And again, this gets back to this sort of toxic mentality in the sector that is the scarcity mindset, that we have to take every dollar that comes in. Oh, well, the funder wants us to do it this way, and that money might not be there if we don't say yes. So we have to say yes. No, you don't. You don't have to say yes.
You don't. And it's hard. It's really hard unless you realize that it's not that hard, because your answer shouldn't be one to make your donors happy. Your obligation has to be to those you serve, to your volunteers, and to your staff. And if saying yes right now puts you in a pickle a year from now, you didn't really help them. And so it goes back to the same just concept of self-care and boundaries, because honestly, if you've got someone that has a hard time with boundaries, you could burn out, quit this job and take another job, and you're going to have the same thing.
Oh yeah, you'll just do it again.
Yeah. And so I echo what Jess said. My first year in this job, I started therapy. And I will tell you, it has been remarkably impactful in helping me learn how to manage myself, which has ultimately made me a much more effective leader.
Yep. You heard it here first, folks. All nonprofit professionals should go to therapy. I wish there was like a, free year of therapy every decade, just as your right as a human being in the United States. Like when you turn 25, here's a free year. When you turn 35, here's a free year. We would get so much out of that.
I mean, the free therapy would be great, but just the concept of it. I mean, this whole concept of hero ball, of just being able to do it all by yourself. Like no one does that. And I used to think it because people hold that myth up, and it's just not true. I hope in our sector and in other sectors, people get comfortable admitting when they can't do things, asking for help, and just not being shamed for it. We should celebrate folks. Everyone should read Brene Brown all the time because she's amazing.
She is amazing. Well, Jason, this was absolutely fantastic. You have to come back and do this with us again.
I am down for Reddit Q&A anytime, any place.
Right on. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. Thanks, Megan.
All right, folks, that's our show. Be sure to follow me on Instagram or Twitter at Jess Birkin. We want to hear from you. Send us a message at our website, charitytherapy.show. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at birkinlaw.com/signup. Charity Therapy is a production of Birkin Law Office, PLLC. Our theme song is by Whalehawk. And remember, folks, this podcast is produced for your entertainment and is not a substitute for actual legal advice.